may not be suitable for all audiences.
This is Vincent van Gogh answering his cell phone. Hello? Hello?
Art 101 with Mr. Burgher.
Scholars, welcome back to another episode of Art 101 with me, Mr. Burgher, America's favorite art teacher. I'm a professional artist and master educator attempting to provide you with the best in art historical content. If you like the content, make sure you like, you share, you subscribe to all those like-minded folks that are going to really dive in to this content.
You know they don't happen anymore.
One of the stories that I often get asked about is the story of Vincent van Gogh's ear. Today, we're going to jump into that story. We're going to kind of start off into the story a little bit. Vincent van Gogh and Paul Gauguin have moved in with each other. This would have been October of 1888. And then we fast forward a couple of months. They've been living together into the Christmas season. So here we go. As the day progressed, he was presented with a gift from Paul Gauguin. He had painted Vincent a picture for a Christmas gift, the painting known as The Painter of Sunflowers. And Vincent took this as kind of a slight because Paul painted from his memory, because he was always encouraging Vincent to not paint from real life and use his imagination. Vincent automatically was assuming that this was Paul making fun of him. And allegedly, when Vincent saw it, he said, "Yeah, that's me all right. That's me gone mad." And Paul was very much insulted by his remarks. And they would continue to argue over the work until Paul would finally leave the house and go to the cafe, which was kind of around the corner and down the street and owned by their landlords. According to police reporting, Vincent would follow him and continue to push the issue. The argument and discussion very much escalated, and Vincent would pick up a glass of absinthe and throw it at Paul, narrowly missing him. Paul would get angry and leave the cafe, and at this time, Vincent would follow him out into the street. And what would follow kind of needs a little bit of setup.
Never stop, no matter how many failures.
So at this time in history, tubes of paint were available, but not necessarily cheap. The cheapest route was to buy a block of pigment. You would then use a razor to shave down the block of pigment and then grind that into a powder that was then mixed with oils and then use that to create the paint. The paint was then put onto a palette that would then be used because it would take quite some time for it to dry. Now out in the street, Vincent pulls a straight-edge shaving razor from his pocket that was used for artistic purposes, and he would threaten Paul with this knife. Now Gauguin was not about to get into this physical altercation. He knew that he was moving, and so he just went away for the night, allegedly getting a hotel room with a prostitute. And Vincent was still very, very upset, so he goes back to the Yellow House to calm down. How does he attempt to calm down? He would paint. Using that same straight-edge razor, he would begin to shave off some pigments and mix some paint for a still life that he was actually creating at this time. And it was while performing this action of beautiful painting that he would have an accident that would be manipulated by history to reflect Vincent as a crazy person.
Well, I'm no astroenterologist, but I can tell you this. You can either get back in the van on your own vocation, or I can drag you by your mustache.
Now, there are three versions of the story. Version number one involves Paul Gauguin attacking him with a sword, cutting his ear off, and Vincent, wanting to not get Paul in trouble with the police, would say that he did it. Another version of the story is that in a fit of depression, Vincent would slice off his ear
I think that there are some components of reasonable believability, but also a lot of doubt cast on that. However, the version of the story that I tend to lean toward as the most accurate, especially knowing Van Gogh's medical history. So over time, Vincent had developed an epileptic type of disorder. Now, he was not born epileptic, but essentially when Vincent would go out into the fields and he would paint these great landscapes, he was painting with an oil-based paint. He had no way to carry all of the supplies and the turpentines and paint thinners that he would need to properly clean the most important and most expensive tools that he had, his paintbrushes. And so he would suck the paint off of the brushes, spitting it out probably, but sucking the paint out all the same. The paint had all kinds of heavy metals and chemicals in it, like lead would give a poisoning to his system. Now, lead poisoning, what does it do? One of the many things that it does to the body is that it attacks tissue like you would find in your brain. And so his brain was literally being dissolved by the lead that was being taken into his system. Now, some people say that because he was consuming so much alcohol, like absinthe, it was helping to flush his system out. However, I don't know that to be medically accurate. The high lead levels in his system were causing neurological issues, including having regular seizures, not knowing what was causing these seizures, thinking that he was just falling on the ground and flailing around, and him claiming not to know what he was doing just seemed to feed into this idea that he was insane. So he's in his room, he is using the straight edge knife to cut the pigment down so he can create some paint to work on this project, and in the process he falls on the ground holding the straight edge knife in his right hand, curled up in a ball, having a very violent seizure. He nicks his ear multiple times, and this is the origin of this legendary event of Vincent van Gogh cutting off his ear. Quite frankly, nobody is ever going to know the true version of the story that occurred. However, I feel like it's important to point out that whatever Vincent's personal flaws were, they should not be conflated to him being crazy. He was a very passionate artist who likely suffered with multiple mental illnesses. These would include manic depression or some form of bipolar disorder, hyperempathy. There was some substance abuse, alcoholism involved. He was known to have delusions. He may have suffered from some mild form of autism. There are some reports of him diving into coprophagia and possibly other unknown mental illnesses. But this guy was not a slobbering mental case. He was a very well-educated man who was completely literate in 4 languages. He loved to sit and read William Shakespeare, George Eliot, and Charles Dickens. He was so far from this savage beast that many so-called art educators want to portray him as to the public. Now, it is also under some contention of how much of the ear was cut off. There are some that claim that he only cut off the lower lobe of his ear. However, very recently, a diagram was discovered that indicates that the only thing remaining of his ear was the lower lobe, and that letter was written by Dr. Felix Ray from Arles that actually treated Vincent after the episode, who actually became very good friends of Vincent. So some of this information has evolved a little bit over time. Now, during this episode, he would hit an artery that's right behind his ear with that blade, resulting in a significant loss of blood, and the people that actually found him initially thought he had bled to death. At any rate, he awakes from this seizure in a pool of blood. He locates the portion of ear that was removed. He would place it in a small box and basically wraps it up like a Christmas gift.
I'll give him a Christmas present he'll never forget!
Now, some of the reports on this are a little bit backwards, but it has been figured out through a great deal of research that Vincent would leave the house with this little package. Now, where did he go? According to the newspaper reports, he would go to a brothel. This brothel was only some 100 yards from Vincent's studio at the Yellow House, and he would present a prostitute only known by the name of Rachel with the box. She would open the box and faint when she looks inside and finds the severed ear. And again, the reports that went out through the police reports and the newspaper reports on the event claim that Rachel was a prostitute at this brothel. But she was not a prostitute. She was the cleanup girl. She was in charge of cleaning the bed sheets and doing laundry at the brothel. According to reports, she knew Vincent before he even came to Arles. Where did they meet? Paris, France. We know without a shadow of a doubt because of the letters that he had written and the records that still exist that she was originally from Arles but was transferred to a hospital in Paris after she was attacked by a dog that was believed to have rabies. And so she went through a huge series of shots and vaccines that were believed to prevent her from dying. And because of the lacerations that she would have on her face and body, the doctors and medical professionals at that time believed the best way to prevent her from bleeding to death and to recover from this attack was to cauterize those wounds on her face. And so they would take hot irons and literally burn the open wounds to get them to cauterize and close up. So why in the world would he present her with this gift? Again, we don't know with 100% certainty, but it is believed that after this ear incident with Vincent, he saw that as a certain level of empathetic understanding of where she was coming from. Now he was disfigured just like she was disfigured. And maybe now they're on like a similar level of disfigurement. Who knows the logic from there? But at any rate, he does present her with this horrible gift, and there is no evidence of them interacting ever again. Now, according to police reports, Paul Gauguin arrives back home at about 7:30 the next morning. Again, this would have been Christmas Eve, and there was a huge crowd around the Yellow House. At that point, Vincent was getting some medical attention and would be taken to the local hospital. He would remain there for 3 days.
It's all part of the recovery process. Ah. Now then.
He had this reputation as the odd, quirky artist, but this opinion of him had very drastically shifted to the belief that he was an insane freak that was now very much unwelcome in the community. In fact, the community had petitioned for his landlords to evict him on the grounds of being a menace to society. He began his journey of the Studio of the South by following this friend Rachel from Paris to Arles, and now she wanted nothing to do with him because of his actions. His brother got a prominent artist, Paul Gauguin, to come with him to the Studio of the South to build this idea, and Vincent had driven him away because of one reason or another. And now the entire city didn't want him around because they viewed him as a menace to their society. Everyone was pointing their finger and calling him crazy. And when everybody's calling you crazy and everybody's calling you a certain thing, it's only a matter of time until you start to believe it yourself. Vincent would place himself into the care of the St. Remy Asylum after having paranoid delusions, and the dream of an artist colony was really dead at that point. But one gift that Vincent left our society with is his advice to younger generations of artists. Go to the museums as often as you can. It is a good thing to know the old painters.
Scholars, I hope you love that as much as I love being able to bring it to you. Make sure you like, share, and subscribe. Do all those interactions, and we'll see you next time. You have yourself a great day.
And when the court course is over and you fail miserably, what you gonna do when Professor Hogan knocks some sense into you?